Welcome to the Level Up Preaching Cohorts, sponsored by the Christian Church Leadership Network and the Compelling Preaching Initiative funded by the Lilly Endowment. Level Up Preaching Cohorts are designed to help new and veteran preachers improve their craft. Our goal is to help each preacher move to a new level of engaging and effective sermons that are biblical, accessible, incarnational, transformational. Our monthly sessions explore one of these four essential factors in depth to help you level up in your preaching. And today, we are going to be looking at an accessible aspect of preaching. And we're going to be talking about preaching and technology. And I am out of my depth on this topic, probably more than any of the 10 we're going to be covering. And so I brought in the highest ranking member I could find. This is my boss, the executive director of the Christian Church Leadership Network, Captain Micah Oder. And here is where we would be some canned applause. There we go. You can hear Micah. Micah has a pretty good background on technology issues, and he and I are going to be sharing today. Captain Mo, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. This is one of those things where it's like, well, who can I get to answer my calls? Micah has to answer my calls. We'll get him on here. No, it's good. This is a good topic, and I'm excited about it. And I'm excited that you're covering this in the cohorts. So
yeah, this is a needed topic because this is just a part of what goes along with ministry in the 21st century. So we're going to cover four different topics today, Micah. We're going to start with hopefully some things that every church can have some access to, and then we're going to get into a little bit more of some tools that may be a little more need a little more conversation on. So let's start with the first one, and that is the website. Tell me what your views are on church websites.
I think you should have a website. So yeah, I know we've got people all over the spectrum. We've got preachers all over the spectrum. Some of the guys that are watching this are like their church has their own private Discord server and stuff like that. John, you don't know what that is, but there's guys that are way ahead on some of that stuff, and then there's other people that are like, what is the World Wide Web? Is that the difference from So we're going to try and stick. Like you said, we're going to start basic and we'll go down. If you're here and you're like, I already know about websites, thanks. Just stick it out because there might be some stuff here that's useful to you. Church website is necessary because, and I actually talk to a lot of preachers that don't really get this. This is the world that we live in now, to where it's like, man, if you don't have a digital presence online, and hopefully that includes more than just a website, but a website's kind of the cost of doing business. So just like you have to have, you probably have to have some sort of bookkeeper, somebody keeping the books at your church. Somebody's got to mow the lawn. You got to have electricity. You're like, well, the early church didn't have electricity. They didn't, but like you need electricity in your church building. In the same way, the website is just kind of the cost of doing business. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be unique, but it needs to exist. And so. Go ahead.
I was going to say, in terms of fancy, I think less is more. I think websites can be very confusing, but there are some simple things you need to have on the website. And let me just say this as a guy that led churches for 42 years, particularly in the last several years as websites became much more prominent. It used to be that when people showed up at your church, that was kind of the front door. The front door was your worship service on Sunday.
Right.
But now, in front of the front door is a screen door.
That's right.
I don't know if you had a screen door when you grew up, Micah, when you opened the door and then there was still a screen door. Well, that's what the website is. It's the screen door. And just like most people don't go look at a car that they haven't looked at online, most people don't go look at a house that they haven't already researched online. A lot of people don't even go to a restaurant that they haven't looked at Yelp and online. Particularly younger folks do that. In the same way, people show up at a church and they are saying, when I know my last several years preaching, they'd say, hey, I saw a couple of your messages online. I decided to check it out. So it's the screen door, and it's very important for people to be able to access you on the web.
I'll say especially parents with young kids, I ain't going anywhere unless I know what's happening, right? I want to know what's going to happen when I get there. So when you talk about, hey, what needs to be on the website? Everybody wants to put a statement of faith and here's our staff team, and those are good things. But
Right.
like, what could I expect on a Sunday morning is a really
Yes.
valuable thing.
Yeah. I'm new here, and what do I expect as someone that's new? Have highlighting your children's ministry. Very good, Micah. Absolutely.
To your point, I see this regularly at our church. I'll talk to someone. I talked to someone this past, I was going to say this past week, probably 2 weeks ago, and I'm just a guy at my church now. I'm an elder, but I'm no longer on staff at my church, which is a weird thing, but it's good. I'm enjoying it. But I
Yeah.
talked to a guy. Guy came up and started talking to me. He goes, "Oh yeah," and it was his first time. He says, "I know you," and I was like, "You don't know me. It's your first time here. You don't know me." He's like, "Yeah, you preached last month, right?" And I was like, "Yes, I did actually." And so I'm an occasional preacher at my church, no longer a regular guy, but I preach, a few times a year, and I preached last month. And so this guy that was a new person recognized me as someone who had preached, a month previously. So
Yeah.
what I thought of him as new, because it was his first time, it wasn't his first time. He'd already been looking in the screen door, to use your analogy. He'd been
Yeah.
doing that for a while. So,
Well, and that's what I found almost 100% when people showed up at church. Here's one thing I would say before we leave the topic of website. For those churches and most of the people that are part of our cohorts, you do have a website, and good on you for that. Have you looked at it lately? Have you looked at your website? Because here's what is so easy to do. Maybe it's the preacher, probably not. Somebody else is in charge of putting the website together, and you
yep.
put it up, and you don't look at it ever again.
Nope.
Go look at your website. Have somebody do that, because I guarantee you probably got some outdated information. You got
Yeah.
something that's incorrect. You got a service time that's not right anymore. You got a new statement that you need up. Look at your website regularly.
Yeah, I would say if you're taking any homework from this week's session, or this month's session, I would say the homework number one is go look at your website because
Amen.
man, I,
Yeah.
I look at church websites regularly and I can't tell you how many times it's got like, here's the details for our Christmas thing, and it's April, right?
And
Um,
I don't know about you, but I hate stuff like that, Micah. I hate out of date information. Even when I walked around our building, when I was the pastor of a local church, if I saw something outdated, I just pulled it down. And I don't like that but websites are notorious for keeping information that's already happened
yep.
because, again, people aren't checking it. All right, let's move on from websites. Let's talk about something that everybody got introduced to about 5 years ago, about this time.
Right.
About
Yeah.
5 years ago, there was probably a certain percent of churches that were doing this, and then all at once, everybody had to figure out how to stream their services. So, Micah, talk a little bit about streaming
Yeah.
services.
Yeah. It was real interesting when all of a sudden everybody went to streaming.
Yeah,
You know, if you were in a place that things were shut down, you had to stream in order to meet on Sunday.
yeah,
Um, it's not clear to me that I'll say this, some churches really benefit from streaming. It's not clear to me that every church does. Um, so I'll talk to churches regularly. They're like, we stream on Facebook and 4,000 people are watching our service on Facebook. I'm going, I don't think those numbers are accurate. Like, do you get prayer requests from those people? You ever gotten a check? Anybody ever send in a check from Facebook? A lot of the counting online is not necessarily what you think it is.
yeah, no, it's not.
Facebook, if somebody watches your video for 15 seconds on Facebook, Facebook's like, hey, you got a view.
Yeah,
And so I want to say, first of all, a lot of people that think they're streaming successfully, my theory of this is that it's not helping them as much as they think it is.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not anti-streaming. I had a couple come and talk to me just a few weeks ago. So they were at their son's travel soccer thing down in Georgia. We're in Cincinnati, just outside Cincinnati, and so they're like, "Oh, it was great. We were able to stream. We didn't miss out. We're caught up on the thing." I'm like, "Well, you kind of didn't miss out because you heard the sermon and the worship was good, but we didn't see you, right? And you weren't in your Sunday school class that week, and you didn't get to shake hands with any." So there is this thing of, I'm glad that my church streams because it's sometimes very helpful, but let's not pretend that there's no trade-offs, right? So one of the things that you need to figure out as a church is like, what are the things that are non-downloadable, right? What are our non-downloadables? What are the things that you can't, you're recording the sermon and then you're podcasting that. That's a podcast is this week's sermon, right? If someone just got your podcast or if they just watched your stream, are they getting everything? Like, is that all of it? Or are there other things to the experience that you want them to experience? Now, I'm not saying you can't experience some of those things online. You absolutely can, but probably not accidentally. The church has to be intentional about that. And so there's a bunch of blogs and articles that you could point to of people that have a variety of opinions on this. I'm not going to weigh in too much on it, other than to say a lot of times it's not as, you might not be getting as much value as you think. However, in terms of retention, in terms of, our reach is so big, what is the stream good for? Well, like I said, a lot of people, before they'll show up to a church, they're going to watch 2 or 3 or 4 services and see, like, does this look like a place that I can fit? And so even in the analogy I used earlier where somebody came and said, I saw you preach. They didn't see me on the website. They did. But what they actually saw was they saw me preach on the stream. So again, I think that can be really valuable. I will say, though, if you're going to do it, you need to do it well. And a lot of times churches do this and they don't do it well. So just think about, like, if church is the screen door, if the stream is the screen door, right? Or if maybe the stream is the front lawn. I don't know. The analogy is going to get away from me quick.
Yeah, exactly.
If you have people over to your house and there's trash all over your front lawn, they don't care how nice it is inside. They're like, maybe I shouldn't be here. I talk to churches regularly that they're like, oh yeah, we're streaming. We have Gladys uses her iPhone and we've got it on a stand in the back of the room and she streams it to Facebook. And I go, okay. If you're going to send that to someone who's shut in, that's probably better than nothing. But man, that may not be the look you want to show to people that are checking out your church for the first time, because music's not going to come through right. The audio is going to be terrible. People jostle the thing. It's the mix in the house, the sound mix in the house for worship and the sound mix online usually don't go well together. A lot of times you need a different mixer for it to really sound great.
Thank you for saying that. That's exactly the one thing I could add to that is that point you just said. Mixing for streaming and mixing for in the house, 2 different things.
Radically different.
Until we had someone that just mixed the stream. Our stream now, I'm going to say ours, I'm talking about Journey Christian Church, where I was the pastor for several years. It sounds really good. When we go back to the early days and we didn't have that, it did not sound. It sounds like sounds coming from a can, very tinny. And so that's a great point about having someone separate to mix it, Micah.
So I'm going to say if you're going to stream, if that's part of your strategy, then I'm for that. I think that can be a great thing, but make sure you do it well, and don't just assume that because you have an iPhone, you're all set up to stream. We're streaming to Facebook. That's like, I don't know.
Yeah, and invest in some, a decent camera. If you're going to,
or 2 or 3.
Yeah, but at least have one, maybe a couple of good cameras, and we can talk about this a little bit later on, Micah. But the people who know the most about this are going to be high school students, college students, some people that are younger, and technology is their native language. For some older guys like me, I'm trying to. It's almost like I'm learning a second language with technology, and it changes so often. But younger adults, it's just the air they breathe. And,
I'll say a lot of places are doing this well, not just churches. Like a lot of places stream regularly. And so there's expertise to be had. You can find people probably in your church that know something about this or are willing to learn or willing to build it out. So again, it's very doable, but you need to consider, count the cost and make sure that what you're doing presents the face to the world that you want to. I also know, I will say, I know some healthy churches, some good, healthy churches that are young churches. We're not talking that it's just people that don't know how to use technology. I know some good, healthy young churches that have said we're going away from live streaming. We'll record something, we'll push it out after the fact. If you want to get a copy of the sermon or whatever after, that's fine. But we're not streaming anymore. I'm not necessarily saying that you should do that. In
Right.
fact, if you're doing streaming well, do streaming well. But
Yeah.
it's not the pandemic anymore.
No.
You don't have to do this to survive.
And maybe take away homework for this, Micah. Number one, go look at your website. Number two, you need a post-COVID philosophy for streaming.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out what your post-COVID philosophy is. COVID was necessary just to survive as a church in many ways.
Sure.
Now we don't do that, and more people are coming back, which is great. I think that's wonderful. I think incarnational people, embodied together, worshiping, that's wonderful. But what's your philosophy for streaming? So wrestle with that in your cohorts a little bit. What is the philosophy for streaming?
Why do we stream? Who's it for?
Yeah.
All that.
All right. Third area we want to talk about, Micah, and that is social media. And social media, again, covers a lot of ground. We mentioned one, Facebook. Of course, there's Instagram,
Sure.
There's X, there's all kinds of different platforms. You probably know platforms I don't even know about. But talk about social media.
Well, there's standard. First of all, I'm going to put this out there. I'm a Zennial, right? I'm a young X or an old millennial, depending on where you draw the line.
Okay.
And so I've been on all the socials for plenty of time. They can be a helpful tool. They can also be very destructive, right? And so there's reasons why a lot of people, especially as you get younger than me, people are like, no, I'm not on social media, right? Because it's not, they see it as maybe not as good. So like my 17-year-old, or no, my 18-year-old is not on any social media, doesn't want to be. But her grandma is. And so Facebook at one point was like the younger generation. It is more becoming a boomer and Xer thing as opposed to a younger thing. So if you think we need to be on Facebook to get rid of, to connect with the young folks, it's like, well, maybe you do. But I would say, again, if you're going to do it regularly and reliably. So if you're going to post announcement type things on your church's Facebook page, I think that's a great idea. Then people need to be able to have an expectation that if there's something they need to know, it's going to be on the church's Facebook page, right? You need to use the tool in a way that people can rely on it. I talked to a guy today. He's at a small country church in Northern Kentucky. And he's like, yeah, we've really, gone away from a lot of the visitation stuff we used to do, and we've gone to Facebook. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm preparing to be underwhelmed. And he said, every Monday morning, I look up people that came to the service on Sunday, and I record a 90-second, hey, John, so glad you were with us yesterday. This is, I'm so-and-so, the senior minister at the church, and I'm so glad you were with us. Here's my personal contact information. If you have any questions for me, feel free to let me know. Sends him a nice little video note via Facebook. And I thought, oh, that's not what I thought you were going to say, right? I thought he was just posting weird memes on his church page. And no, he's actually using it as a connection tool. He says some people respond, some people don't. He says he's never had anybody that was upset that he sent that. Most people are like, wow, he made a video just for me, right?
Yeah, right.
That's clever. So I would say for social media, the two rules that I would give you. The first rule is if you're going to use a church Facebook page, only post your own content. I would encourage you not to get into something where you're reposting your favorite memes, where you are passing on recipes, where you are copying over, Facebook turned blue. If copy this into your profile or if you put this in a post, then Facebook won't be able to use your messages. I do not give Facebook permission, like that whole chain letter nonsense. I would really encourage you strongly that if your church is going to run a Facebook page, the only thing that goes on it is your church's content.
I couldn't agree more. One of the things I heard that social media can do it can be an extender of the weekend, which I
Mhm.
think is a
Right.
good use of it. So there's a lot of different sermon clips that
Sure.
people take a 1 or 2 minute clip and they put it on their social media,
Totally.
sites. Or maybe, you had a big baptism weekend. Maybe you
Yes.
baptized a dozen people. That's a
Yes.
great way to extend the excitement and letting your congregation just see those pictures, maybe some videos again. But Facebook, social media can be an extender in a positive way
Yes.
of what you want from the weekend.
That's right. I completely agree. It's a great, like, every different group in your church wants an announcement every
Yeah,
Sunday.
yeah,
And to be able to say, okay, we're not going to do that, but we will put a Facebook post out every week that's got announcements on it. Okay, well, people, if it's reliable, if you consistently send it out, people will actually read that. So there's a lot of stuff about, improving your algorithm and making sure your content actually gets to your people. A lot of those rules change regularly, so find someone who's social savvy and get into
yeah.
that. But yep,
All right. So we got website, we talked about streaming, and we talked about social media. Now we're going to talk about something that probably just the last 2 or 3 years has become a little more prominent. And here's where we get into some of the philosophical weeds of how to use this technology, and it is AI. Micah, commercials about AI for everything you can imagine. We
right.
hear a lot about. But I'm hearing a lot more about AI in ministry, particularly for preaching, and
Sure.
how it is a tool for preaching. And again, there's a breadth of opinion about AI. So let's dive into this a little bit. Just give us a general view that you would have of AI.
Sure. So I'll tell you first off, every AI generated sermon I've seen is terrible.
Mm,
But the tool keeps getting better. Maybe they
yeah,
won't always be terrible.
yeah.
And so let's not, even by the time this video is seen, somebody's going to have a new, Chat GPT 7 or Claude is going to go up or whatever your thing is. So let's not build this conversation around expediency. Let's talk about who we are as people first. All right. So John Hampton, you and I, we've known each other for a long time. I've never heard you preach a bad sermon, John.
Mm,
I've
right.
heard a lot of your sermons, and they've all been good. And so, if I, as a preacher, was to look at a John Hampton sermon, let's say I had access to all of your sermons you ever preached, and if I was to look at your sermons and say, "Man, I want to learn about preaching from reading John's sermon," oh man, John had a line in this sermon that was really good that I liked. That's one thing. But if I started preaching your sermons as if they were my own, that would call into question my integrity, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
if you found out that I was preaching your sermon and it was your sermon, you'd be like, "What's going on?" Now, you people preachers share outlines and manuscripts. That happens all the time. That's
Sure.
fine.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say that a lot of where we are, a lot of stuff in terms of generative, what we call generative AI. Maybe the sermon is okay, but does it sound like you? The sermon
Hmm.
is, you as a preacher are more than just the next sermon. Like you have to believe that you have something to offer people that's more than just the next sermon, right? And if you're finding out about what's in the sermon as you're preaching it, like what's going to happen when people talk to you about your sermon, right? So generally speaking, I think if you listeners were the kind of people that just wanted AI to write your sermons for you, well, then you'd already be getting your sermons from Sermon Central or from Bob Russell Ministries, archive list or from something. Like you would already be doing that. You're not the kind of person that does that. You're not the kind of person that downloads 52 sermons from Sermon Central. Why would you be somebody who uses Chat GPT, right? Now that being said, what these models are is mostly like autocomplete on steroids, right?
Mm.
So the danger of using them is that sometimes all of the AIs that exist so far do something called hallucinate, and they will say things that are not true. It's not that they're lying, it's they're trying to come up with the next thing. And so it does happen that AIs will quote Bible verses that don't exist, will cite studies that never exist. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't ever use AI. I would just say you shouldn't use AI to generate something that you can't generate on your own. And if you can do
Yeah.
it on your own, you should do it on your own. Here's some ways I use AI regularly. I use it as a search, the way I used to use a search engine, right?
Hmm.
So things that I used to Google, I now plug into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever I'm using. Right now I'm on ChatGPT, but I've gone back and forth between a couple. Like, they improve, so one's better than another. I use ChatGPT sometimes in sermon preparation in very specific ways. I was somewhere and I was talking about I was like, now how far is it from? I was talking about Joshua. I was like, how far is it from the Red Sea to Mount Sinai? I could have Googled it. I ChatGPT'd it, right? 250 miles. I said, how far from here, wherever here was, what's 250 miles away from here? What is a major city that's 250 miles away from here? And it gave me a couple of options of where that was. I was like, okay, that's a helpful thing.
Yeah.
That's something I would have Googled. Now I chat GPT'd. And it's helpful to have a conversational partner. Hey, what are some common reasons why people do these kinds of things? And so I'll ask questions back and forth, but I never use content in a sermon that I don't that I don't write myself. So I don't ever copy and paste anything from ChatGPT into my sermon, just like I wouldn't ever copy and paste something from a article that I read somewhere. It's plagiarism, and there's an integrity piece, even apart from the fact that the training data for any of these things is the whole internet. So basically, you just upload the whole internet into a processing program, and then you're spitting out a large language model. Well, I don't know if you know this, but there's a lot of bad information on the internet, and so just because AI says it doesn't make it true. I'd like to have a better grasp of theology than whatever's the average on the internet.
Yeah, and I think that gets to the heart of it, and we'll just kind of wrap up with these thoughts. Nobody can study God's word on your behalf,
That's right.
and then you present a credible representation of that study. You have to be able to have some kind of ability to think for yourself, to deduct some things for yourself, to put together just some thoughts from your own study.
That's
And
right.
I don't think that's going to change. Let me tell you one use I just did recently that Chat GPT helped me with. So I was asked to speak at a Christian school in one of our local communities here in Central Florida. And they said, we want you to come speak at our Easter chapel. And I said, yeah, I'll be happy to do that. And they said, all the students will be there. And about 200 students, kindergarten through eighth grade was the range of this school. Parents are going to come, grandparents, kind of a big deal. So I put together the message. I read it for my wife, and she said, "You're going to share that with kids?" Because Micah, here's the reality. I don't preach. I don't put together sermons. I don't write kid sermons. I don't write
Sure.
teen sermons. I write sermons, and I
Right.
write things that I speak to me and are interest to me. So I don't really think about, well, how's this going to sound to a 6-year-old or a sixth grader? So I went to ChatGPT. I put my sermon in. I said,
Whole thing.
help this be kid friendly. And it generated about a half a dozen really relevant illustrations, anecdotes, updated a few phrases. It was really good. It really helped me connect with those kids better. Now, it was the content that I put in, but it said, here is a better a way to say that for kids. And
That's good.
I was able to use, I'd say, probably 4 or 5 of the suggestions that it put together.
I'll tell you one other thing I really like. I really like ChatGPT for things like waivers and policies. Your church
Mhm.
probably needs more policies than it has.
Yeah,
And writing policy, there's people that love doing that. I would rather gouge my eyes out. And
yeah,
so if it doesn't have anybody's name on it, then I'm not nearly as concerned about using AI for generative things. So like nobody signs the waiver. This waiver was created by Micah Oder. You had a
right.
going on a youth canoe trip. We need a waiver, or we've got you know, we need a policy on this. ChatGPT is pretty good at that kind of stuff. So there's definitely places where you can use them where it's appropriate. I would just say in your situation where you say, ChatGPT is really good at giving writing advice. If you write something and just say, hey, analyze this and give me advice, okay, then you can choose whether or not to take it.
Right.
I'm always open to advice. People give me advice all the time. I don't always take it, but they give me advice all the time. So yeah, John, I think that's a valid way to use it, is to say, okay, here's what I'm planning. What advice do you have? That's help this to be clearer, help this to be shorter, those kinds of things. Those are useful things.
Yeah, and it's almost like, I use a tool called Grammarly, and Grammarly, it basically corrects your grammar. It helps you, hey, the sentence needs to be phrased this way, and it'll give you options. Sometimes it'll say, want to be more clear, use this version. Want to be more engaging, use this version. Sometimes they use it, but you're the editor and you have to be responsible. I remember, this goes back a long time ago, in a public speaking class, Cincinnati Bible College, when there was a Cincinnati Bible College. I was in a public speaking class. I told something that probably I shouldn't have said in public. And when I got done, I could tell my professor was not pleased. And I said a lame excuse. I said, well, I heard so-and-so say this. And he looked at me and he said this. I've never forgotten it. He said, but when you said it, you're responsible for it.
Oh, that's good.
So
that's
where
good.
do you get your information from? How, artificial generated, from old school books, online searching? When you say it, preacher, you're responsible for it. And I think that's probably a good way to leave this session. Micah, if guys or gals that are watching have want to connect with you a little bit more about this,
sure.
Can they just email you at, give us your email.
Yeah, it's just Micah@ccleadership.org. And so
Micah@ccleadership.org. Hey, Micah, thanks for joining us on this lesson. It's been helpful. We just barely lifted the lid a little bit on some important topics. These technology topics are not going to go away. They're just going to become much more widespread, sometimes much more complex. And anything we can do at CCL, I know Micah would say that, anything he can do to help you, we'd be happy to do that. So probably what your homework will be in this session, and the content will probably be more article driven. We've got some articles that we want you to read through, some that you can use in your group discussion, and some other tools that we'll pass along in the notes. Hey, thanks for joining us with Lesson 9, Technology. That means you've got one more session left and you will have completed your cohort. And I'm so excited about that. And I look forward to joining you next month. God bless you.
That's awesome. See you guys.